So let's do it, guys. First and foremost, just some logistics that we want to cover before we get going. If you have attended our events in the past, this won't be a surprise to you, but throughout this presentation, we want you to feel free to put any questions that you might have about anything that we're talking about. Anything at all is really, there's the kind of, we take a no holds barred approach to questions. So just make sure that you're putting your questions in the Q&A side of your Slack. You've been putting things in the chat and we've seen your introductions and those are great, but when you have questions, just make sure that you're putting them in that Q&A button feature, and that's going to help us kind of organize the questions and make sure that we either address those as we go. Again, Lauren is going to be working behind the scenes to be managing that, but we can also take live questions at the end. So as long as we're putting them in that Q&A, that'll be easy for us to manage. And like I mentioned earlier, a recording of today's session is going to be emailed to everybody who registered tomorrow. And then we're also going to put this on our YouTube page, which is a public YouTube page. And so if you hear something during the presentation, you're like, oh, I really want to review what was covered, or I'd love to see that slide again, just rest assured that everyone will have access to this recording. And it'll be really easy to play it again and again if you want to. So now that we've covered the logistics, on to the actual webinar. So just to remind everybody, I think you're all probably in the right place, but today we're going to be talking about negotiation and getting the salary that you deserve after you get a job offer. So this is something that I think a lot of people sometimes have fears about, or a lot of times people don't quite know how to go about negotiating. And so hopefully we're going to cover some really, just practical, helpful tips that you can apply the next time that you get a job offer, or you can even maybe apply to the job that you might have now if you're negotiating a raise at any point. So today's goals, once again, we're going to be exploring strategies for effective salary negotiation and hopefully teaching you all some important information to help you get the compensation that you deserve. Just as a brief introduction, like I said, Lauren, who's our VP of Learning Design here and co-founder of Pathstream, is going to be working behind the scenes today to help manage the chat and the Q&A. My name is Anthony Jones. I'm on the instructional design team, and I am thrilled to be leading you through this presentation today. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to cover, why negotiate in the first place, right? Like that's a question that some of you might have. And then we're going to talk more brass tacks around establishing your value, how you can negotiate everything, not just salary, why it's important to always be thinking about building relationships, even when you're negotiating, and then we can get to that Q&A at the end. So let's just imagine for a second that you just got a job offer. This is a great moment. It's a triumphant moment. It's a time to celebrate. And it's a time, I think, when a lot of people, and justifiably so, they kind of exhale and they feel like, okay, the hard part's over. I got the job that I wanted. I'm just going to accept this role and get to work, right? Like that's the next step. And what I'm here to tell you is, unfortunately, that's wrong. It's actually time to negotiate your job offer. So the work's not quite over when you get that job offer. You really need to kind of go into negotiation mode, because believe me, the work that you put in at this stage is really going to have a big payoff. And so we're going to talk about those strategies, in just a second. But first, I think sometimes folks wonder, why should I even bother to negotiate? I just got a job offer. I want the job. Why not just accept it? And really, it's super important too, because a lot of the data suggests that, only 39% of people actually negotiate salary increase during their job offer. But 85% of those people who do negotiate receive better offers. And so really, you should always negotiate. I know that sounds simple, but it's really is a rule that I hope if you take away anything from this presentation, it's taking away this rule that you should always negotiate. And I know that for some folks, it might be scary. Believe me, like the times when I've negotiated job offers, I've felt that fear too. I think it's a very rational thing to feel like, well, what if they take it away? What if they just decide that they're going to, remove the job offer entirely, and then I don't have a job and I'm back to square one? And really, that fear is something that you have to do your best to quell because it's just simply not true. There's no honest employer out there, if you go through the negotiation strategies that we lay out today, that is just going to suddenly say, you know what, no more job for you. We're just going to take it away and move on. It's just not going to happen. And so if we can kind of put that fear to the side and remember that you have nothing to lose by negotiating, but you have a lot to gain. Just remember that. So the first step in negotiation is really establishing your value. And we're going to get into what that means and how to do that. The way that we're going to do that today is we're going to be focusing on a case study. We're going to look at this person, Naomi. And you can imagine that in the past, Naomi is somebody who's worked in customer service and has just completed a Salesforce certificate earlier in the year and has been looking for a higher paying job. So she's been looking for a little while. She's been, submitting her resume. She's been going on interviews. And after 10 weeks of looking for a Salesforce role, right? So, almost 3 months, she's received now a sales ops specialist job offer for $52,000. She wants to accept the job, but she feels like the salary might be a little bit low. And so we're going to walk through what a negotiating process might look like for Naomi in this case. Let's walk through kind of the step-by-step methodical approach she's going to take to negotiating. So before Naomi rushes to make a counteroffer, right? Like she's not just going to fire off an email and say, okay, I want the job, but I want 20% more money. No, she's not going to rush to that, right? First, she wants to get some information from the people that she's going to be negotiating with. Really keep this in mind as much as you possibly can, but in any negotiation, knowledge of the other person's position is absolutely critical, right? The more you know about where the other person stands and why they think what they think and what they value and really what they want, the easier it's going to be for you to negotiate because you'll be able to craft your arguments in such a way that really resonate emotionally and psychologically with that other person. So you need that information first and foremost, and that sometimes can be a methodical and a slower process. So really maybe the first thing to do once you get that job offer is to just take a deep breath and not feel like you have to be rushed and you have to make a decision right then and there, or you have to immediately ask for more money. Really, you want to take a step back and you want to start to gather as much information as you can. So in this case, Naomi wants to first clearly know, why did this employer choose her exactly? What do they value about her? And that's going to be the first thing that she wants to start to ask so that she can start to get that information and establish her value to them. So one way tactically that you can do this is you can get the company to share the reasons why they think you're valuable and worth paying a premium for by asking a question like, I imagine there were a lot of qualified candidates who applied to this role. Why did you ultimately choose me? And so let's kind of go through what that might look like in an email exchange, because a lot of times these negotiations, they're going to take place through email, which is actually kind of nice because it gives you time to kind of sit and gather your thoughts before you rush to make any decision. So let's just say that in this case that the company offer, which we'll call this day one of the negotiations, look like this. Let's say that the hiring partner reached out to Naomi and said, hey, Naomi, the vice president of sales loved talking to you earlier this week, and we're thrilled to offer you the role of sales operations specialist. This position comes with a base salary of $52,000, and I've also included a PDF which details the benefits package we are offering. Please let us know by the end of the week if you'd like to accept this role. Looking forward to hearing from you. And so again, we've established that Naomi doesn't want to rush to any decision. She doesn't want to rush to saying yes or rush to saying no. She doesn't want to rush to making a counteroffer. She wants to gather information. And so the way that might look is this could be her day one response. She says, that's very exciting news. Thank you for your offer. I truly appreciate it. And so just those two sentences alone Naomi has done something super important. She has established a polite tone. She's clearly on friendly terms with the potential employer, but she's not giving anything away. She's not rushing to a decision. She's not giving any information on her side. She's simply gathering more information. So she says, I would love to understand your process a bit more before coming to a decision. In this case, I imagine there were a lot of qualified candidates. Why did you ultimately decide to choose me for this role? So before we get into how the company is going to respond to this, just want to make it clear that, Naomi doesn't want to be taking a self-centered approach during the negotiations either. She doesn't want to come across as being, super selfish, or she doesn't want to come across as, being arrogant or anything like that, right? She wants to take an us-centered approach with the company, because if this is a job that she ultimately wants to accept, and this is a company that she ultimately wants to work for, she wants to establish that she's working with the company. They're working as a team to come up with a solution here where the company can get what it wants, which is Naomi working for them, and Naomi can get what she wants, which is a better offer, right? So just keep in mind that she's going to be taking this us-centered approach throughout the negotiations. And Naomi knows something very important that I hope all of you know as well. But a new hire, it costs a lot of money for a company, right? It costs about $4,000 in recruiting costs for a mid-range position. So no company wants to hire someone only to have to find their replacement in the near future. So what Naomi can do here is, using this knowledge, she can signal to the hiring manager that she's taking an us-centered approach by letting them know that she wants to be with the company for the long haul, right? She sees a real future with this company, which might make it easier for them to make a bigger financial commitment. If they feel like Naomi is somebody who is going to help them solve their problems long term, it's going to make it a lot easier for them to commit a little bit more money up front. So Naomi can signal this by asking a question like, how can I be guaranteed the opportunity to be involved in projects that are critical to the company's future? So let's kind of see how this plays out in the email exchange. And so let's just say that the company email on day 2 looks something like this. And keep in mind, sometimes these email exchanges, you might only get one email per day, right? It might take a while for the company to get back to you after you've given your response. And sometimes that can be really nerve-wracking, right? Sometimes in that space where somebody doesn't respond to you, all types of fears can get activated in your head. You can start to think, oh my gosh, what if I made them upset? What if now they're going to somebody else and they're offering them the job? What if I'm going to lose out on this opportunity? And what we call that is negotiating against yourself. You're starting to develop a self-talk that is going to weaken your position, because it's going to weaken your will and your resolve to get what you deserve. And so, as much as possible, I know it's hard because we all have these feelings, right? They're very natural, but you can't negotiate against yourself. And so you have to have faith that the company is going to be acting, as a good actor. And like, if they don't, if the low probability event happens and they do something shady, well, guess what? You didn't want to work there anyway. But in this case, we're gonna have faith that the company's acting as a good actor. And so we can see that on day 2, they responded and say, hey, Naomi, that's a great question. Now they're answering the question about why they valued her so much, right? We loved your experience with stakeholder management at your last job and your willingness to take on new challenges, as evidenced by the Salesforce certificate you completed this year. As a company, we value empathy and grit. You really embody these 2 characteristics for us, and that puts you at the top of our list. So this is super valuable information, because later on, Naomi is going to use the words of the company to make her argument. You'll see how she does that a little bit later. But first, she wants to also signal to them that she's taking this us-centered approach and that she's going to be in it for the long haul, because the likelihood of that signal equaling greater salary is high. So this is what Naomi says. Just thank you so much. Again, she's not committing to taking the job or not taking the job. She's not immediately asking for additional salary. She's gathering more information, right? I really appreciate you elaborating on your process in this case. Another thing I'd love to know is how you see this role contributing to the mission of the company, which I feel very drawn to. Specifically, how can I be guaranteed the opportunity to be involved in projects that are critical to the company's future? So that's her day two response. At this point too, and probably simultaneously during these email exchanges, Naomi can start to gather salary data on the role to see what people who currently work as sales ops specialists make on average. There are a ton of really good websites out there that you all can go to start to gather that salary data, and some of them include payscale.com. That's a really good one, and that's the one that we're going to use for the examples in this presentation. But glassdoor.com is great, and you could even go on LinkedIn and you can find salary information as well. And so you can see here that Naomi has gone on PayScale, and she figures out that, oh, okay, the average sales operations specialist salary is about $55,588 per year. And she can say to herself, okay, so the current offer that this company has made of $52,000 a year, it's below the average salary based on this data that she's seeing on payscale.com. And so that's kind of interesting. And she can now decide, I think, in pretty good faith, that she's going to make a counteroffer and ask for 20% more annual salary. So she's going to ask for $62,400 per year. That's going to be what she asked for, which is a 20% more is a pretty standard counteroffer. And she's going to use what she learned in her email exchange with the company to craft her argument. But now this is interesting. What she's not going to do in this case is she may decide not to mention the data that she's seen from PayScale. And the reason why, I think, honestly, you can go either way here in a negotiation if you want to actually bring up this data when you make your counteroffer. But in some cases, I would advise against that, just because you don't want to find yourself down a rabbit hole where you're getting in an argument, let's say, with the company around the source of your data. So there definitely have been situations where I think people have immediately just gone to the data from, like, say, PayScale, and they've used that as the basis for their argument, only to have the company come back and say, well, really, that data from PayScale isn't valid, and here's where we're pulling our data. And I don't think you want to get in a data argument with a company when you're negotiating with them. You want to make more of an emotional case that's based on the information that you've already gathered from them in your exchange. So here's what you can imagine the company's day three response. Now they're responding to Naomi's question about what does the future look like for this role in the company. So the company says, hey, Naomi, another great question. We see this role as a liaison between our sales and marketing teams. One of the problems we need to solve for in the near future is how our sales team can better use the insights from marketing to close deals. Hopefully, you can be the missing link between these teams and help take our sales to the next level. So at this point, Naomi has some really, really solid information. She can feel secure about asking for 20% more salary because she's looked at a data source and she has her anchor point. And so this is how Naomi responds. And I want you to pay close attention to this response because I think it's a really great one. Naomi says, thank you for providing that context. That's really great to know. Based on my stakeholder management expertise and the critical role I'd be playing between sales and marketing, I'd feel really good about accepting this offer if you were willing to increase the annual salary to $62,400 per year. So you'll notice here that Naomi is using the words, she's using the information that the company gave her through this exchange to finally make the case for asking for 20% more salary. And so I hope that methodical process of how she gathered the information and then actually made the counteroffer make sense and how it came together. But of course, like with any game where each side gets a move, the company gets to respond. And so let's see what the company says. And we can imagine that this takes place on day 4 of the negotiations. The company says, hey, Naomi, thanks for your email. I discussed your request with my manager, and I'm happy to let you know that we are able to offer you an increased salary of $57,000 per year. Although this isn't exactly what you requested, I assure you it is the highest salary where we can offer you for this position. As a result, it is our last best offer. Please let us know your decision by the end of the week. Well, let's kind of unpack this company email, right? Like, we've already gotten to day 4 in the week. So we could imagine that the end of the week is probably tomorrow in this case. Naomi didn't get all that she wanted, and the company is telling her, well, this is the highest that we can offer. Now, Naomi doesn't have visibility into the company's finances, so there's no way that she can confirm or disprove that. She's kind of in this position where it's like, well, I can't call you a liar. And if that's what you're saying, and I'm treating you like a good faith negotiating partner, well, maybe I have to accept that as truth. And maybe this is the last best offer. So what do I do? Do I just accept the offer at this point? Do I walk away because I didn't get exactly what I wanted? What's the response? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we do, it's time for a little pop quiz. So this is a time for us to kind of take stock of what we learned thus far, and let's just take a second and see what we've learned. Okay, so go ahead for this, and you can type your answers in the chat. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. You can type them as fast as you think you know. The first question is, if you negotiate, there's a strong chance the employer will take away their job offer. Is that true or false? Please type your answer in the chat. False. False. Never. Spencer, I love it. False. Yes. False, 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 false. I love it. I love it, guys. Great. Yes, you are correct. That is absolutely false. There is not a strong chance the employer will take away their offer. People expect you to negotiate. So always negotiate. I hope if there's anything that you take away from this presentation, it's always, always, always negotiate. Question 2. The first thing you should do when negotiating is ask for 20% more salary. True or false? Please type your answers in the chat. Okay, I see a couple trues, lots of falses. See another true. False, false, false. Most of them are, I see another false. Just wait another couple seconds if anyone else wants to weigh in. False. The answer is false. You don't, eventually, it is a common practice that you will make a counteroffer for 20% more salary, but it's not the first thing that you want to do. You don't want to rush to that counteroffer. The first thing that you want to do is really kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and start gathering information about the other side's position. So remember what Naomi did is she was able to ask questions so that she could figure out, okay, why does this company value me? And what is the future of this role in the company? And why is that critical? And once she got that information, she used it to then craft her argument as a justification for asking for 20% more salary. And so you want to take your time, you want to be methodical, don't be rushed, gather the information, and then the information that you get about the other side's position, use that to justify what you're asking for. And that's a lot stronger of an emotional argument than just saying, well, give me 20% more salary and I'll take the job. All right, question 3. This is a free response. So in any negotiation, what's the most critical thing that you need? In any negotiation, what's the most critical thing that you need? Feel free to type your answers in the chat. I'll give you all a couple minutes, maybe a minute to put what you think. I like a lot of the answers I'm seeing. This is a smart crowd. I'm telling you, this is a smart crowd. Love it. I'll just give you, if anyone else is typing, I'll give you, 10 more seconds. Great. So I'm seeing a lot of I think there you could make an argument that a lot of the things that you all are mentioning are critical. Patience, Marie, absolutely. Patience is super important because you don't want to get to that state where you're kind of overcome with anxiety and you're negotiating against yourself and you're being impulsive. That's not the place that we want to be when we're negotiating. And it can be hard because we all feel those feelings, but it takes a certain amount of discipline to be able to stop yourself from doing something that you know deep down is not the most productive thing to do. Knowing your value is super important, and that's obviously connected to information about where the other party stands, right? Because you want to know, why do they value you, and why is it important for them to hire you? Remember, they chose you for a reason. They want you to take the job, so they have a desire for you to come over, and you have leverage. If they want something from you, that means you have leverage. So I like that a lot. Yep, information, knowing how to build relationships. Great point, Hugo. You definitely want to be polite, and we're going to talk more about this a little bit later. But since you bring it up, Hugo, you definitely want to be polite, and you want to be communicating in such a way where it's clear that you're going to stand up for yourself. You're going to know your worth, and you're going to get, as close to what you want as possible. But you're also working together. It's not a conflict, right? It's a problem that you're solving together with the other party. So you're building that relationship, and you're carrying yourself during these negotiations in such a way where you're even more firmly establishing yourself in the company's mind that you're the type of person that they want to work with, right? If they like you, chances are that they're going to give you what you want. If they don't like you, chances are they're not going to give you what you want, and they're probably not going to want you to work for them, right? So, yep, lots of people are putting information on what the employer wants, where you stand, value yourself. Always, Muhammad, always value yourself. No, they value you, Edwin. Yes, of course. Interesting, Philip. Flexibility. I'm interested. If you want, you can put in the chat, Philip, what you mean by flexibility. That's kind of I'm interested in what you mean by that. I'm not quite sure, but potentially fascinating. Anyway, let's move on. And let's review a little bit about what we've talked about thus far before we get to the end game with Naomi. So negotiating, once again, is a methodical step-by-step process. Don't rush, right? Don't rush. Ask a company to state your value in their own words, because guess what? You can then use those words to make your argument back to them. And chances are, if you're using somebody's words to make an argument to them, they're going to agree, right? Because it's their words after all, right? They want to agree with themselves. It's basic human nature. You can also ask them to articulate how you fit in their future vision too. And that's something that will help establish in their minds that you're somebody who's in it for the long haul, right? You're not just going to cut and run. You want to be there for a while. And if they see you as a long-term investment, chances are they're going to be more likely to give you more money up front, right? And then finally, making a counteroffer for 20% more salary is standard operating procedure. You should have the data to back it up, but you don't necessarily have to include that data in your argument. And even if you're like, you do the math and 20% more seems like, oh my gosh, I can't ask for this. This is too high. Believe me, the worst thing that a company can ever do is they can just say no, right? Like that's the absolute worst thing can happen. So there's nothing to really worry about there. You should make the counter offer, and you should be confident that what you're doing is totally normal. It's standard operating procedure, and probably they're going to try to meet you somewhere in the middle, right? Once again, I think we've covered this in great detail, but gathering this knowledge of their position, the other side, the company in this case, is critical to crafting an effective argument, because of course you can use their words to make it hit home. But where we stand now is, what should Naomi do now that the company has made their quote Last best offer. She has one more day. What should she do? Well, this is where I really want to talk about this concept that I think, a lot of people, it's kind of simple when you know it, but before you know it, you might not think of it. It's one of those things. So really want to hammer this home that salary is just one of the things that you can negotiate, right? During a job offer negotiation. But don't ever forget that everything is potentially on the table. And so by everything, I mean, excuse me, you can negotiate things like the amount of paid time off or PTO that you have. You could negotiate the ability to work remotely potentially. You could also negotiate the amount of professional development resources that you have, or literally, if whatever your imagination can come up with around whatever else is specific to your industry or your role, you can ask for, right? There's no harm in asking for these things or imagining a world in which everything is on the table. It just expands the game board in a really interesting way, and it helps you make a really fantastic counteroffer. Just make sure you know your why, right? Don't just start asking for things just because you can and you don't really have an argument to back it up. That's when a company is going to look at you kind of as a non-serious person, and it's very unlikely that you're going to get what you want. But if you know your why and you can craft an argument behind that, the chances go way, way up that the company's actually going to hear you out and consider allowing you to have that in your counteroffer. So let's kind of see how Naomi goes through this. So remember, in Naomi's case, she values professional development very highly, right? This is something that she's demonstrated in the past, because remember, the reason why she got this job offer is she took a Salesforce certificate. So this is something that she has, she's done, and she will do it again. She will do it again in the future because she values learning and she sees that as a chance to really develop her professional career. And she thinks that, look, if I can get this company to cover some of that cost, well, guess what? It's going to incentivize her learning, which is super important to her. But, let's all be honest. Sometimes we need a little bit of an incentive to do something tough, like an online program where we learn a new skill. It's also going to save her money. If this is something that she was going to spend money on anyway, but she can get her future company to agree to cover that cost, well, it's all just money, right? If it's more salary or it's the agreement to pay for her professional development, what's the difference between dollars and dollars, right? They're both dollars at the end of the day. So it's a really clever way to not only incentivize something that's going to really benefit her, but it's also going to help her achieve her original goal, which is just sort of get the company to pay her more, right? So she knows her why in this case, right? She knows that professional development is a big reason why she got her current job offer. And she knows that if she shows this company that she plans to continue upskilling, she's going to signal to them that her value to the company over time is only going to increase. So because she knows her why, now she can make a really awesome argument. So remember, this is where we left things, right? This is day 4. The company said that, hey, we're going to give you part of what you asked for as far as your increased salary. Naomi asked for $62,400. They countered with $57,000. They told her it's their last best offer. But Naomi decided, you know what? I'm going to expand the game board here. I'm going to negotiate something other than salary, but it's going to have a similar net benefit because the professional development costs money. So Naomi says, thank you. I appreciate the increase in salary. Very polite, building the relationship yet again. I reviewed the benefits package and I didn't see any money for professional development though. As you know, the Salesforce certificate I earned enabled me to be a great fit for this role. Remember, the company said that to her. They said they really appreciated that she got that Salesforce certificate. So again, she's using that knowledge that she gathered early in the process. Naomi says, and I would love to continue growing in this field. I'd feel great about accepting your offer if you're willing to make me an offer of an additional $2,000 for future professional development opportunities. Now, in some cases, maybe the company says no. But again, You don't lose anything by asking. And if you make a great case, if you know your why, you're at least putting yourself in a position where the company can give you some or all of what you're asking for in this case, right? But the worst that can happen is they say no. And then you know what? You can make a decision based on that information. But in this case, because Naomi made such an amazing counter proposal, well, I think it's going to go her way. But before we see how this ends, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more around this piece about building relationships, because I don't think you can say enough about the importance of relationships, especially when it comes to your professional life, right? And just this simple fact that people are far more likely to give you what you want if they like you. This is just sort of one of these facts of life. It doesn't mean that you have to bend and twist and say things that you don't mean and pretend to like people that you don't like. It just means that you have to be a professional, respectable human being who shows that respect and kindness to other people, right? Like, you can be true to yourself and you can also just be a flat out a decent person. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So it's super important to carry yourself with that class, with that character, with that professionalism, because again, if the side that you're negotiating with, if they think you're rude or difficult, do you really think they're going to want to pay you more? Or do you think they're going to really want you to work for them? Or if you're at the job, do you really think that it's going to be a pleasant work environment, right? Like, we all know the answer to that. It's common sense. And so, the bottom line here is this, is you might not get exactly what you want during negotiations, but if you make sure that you're pleasant, you're friendly, you're respectful, you're professional throughout the entire process with an eye, right? You're keeping that eye on building relationships for the future, because ideally, right, you're going to be working for this company and you're going to be seeing these people and you're going to be in this environment, for a long time. So you just don't want to forget that your relationships are largely going to determine the quality of your job. So keep that in mind, and don't get upset during the negotiation process or feel like it's a conflict, just because you don't get what you want, right? It's super important to maintain, again, that like professionalism. But you know what? Guess what? You can always negotiate again in 6 months after you take an offer. That's the beautiful thing about negotiating, is you can negotiate anything, anytime, anywhere if you do it right. So this is something where if like you go into a job and you kill it and you're doing great work, hey, 6 months later, talk to your manager and start negotiating a salary again, or start negotiating for those professional development opportunities. Like, chances are, if you have a strong relationship with your manager is going to want you to be happy. But here's the other thing too, right? If during the negotiating process, you don't like the way that the company is treating you, if on your side, you are behaving in a way that is professional and kind and respectful, and you're not getting that from them, if you feel like a company's disrespecting you in any way, not treating you well during the negotiating process, and you just don't like the way they handle it, guess what? That's important information that you gathered too, and you can always walk away, right? Like, that's why negotiating is so important, because you'll also get a sense, how does this company solve problems with people? And if you don't like the way that they solve problems with you, it might be a good sign that, this isn't the best fit. And so just because you have a job offer, I just want to be clear about that. You don't have to take it, right? Like, you don't have to do something where you really don't feel good about the people that you'd be working with. So just wanted to throw that out there, because that's just something to keep in mind. But let's get back to kind of Naomi's situation. So you can imagine, this is day 5. This is that Friday. And the company says to her, "Hi, Naomi, we're thrilled that you're so excited about continuing to level up your Salesforce skills. And I'm happy to tell you that, yes, we can offer you an annual budget of $2,000 towards any professional development opportunities, in addition to your annual salary of $57K. Please let us know as soon as possible if you'd like to accept our offer." And well, Naomi's response is, "It's time to celebrate." So it took us a few days. We were patient. We negotiated, but we got a lot better deal. We got a lot better offer. We liked the way that the company treated us during this process, and we got ourselves a new job. To review, before negotiating, Naomi this was her offer. Actually, is it 50,000? Might have been 52,000. Anyway, 50. Let's say it was $50,000 a year for annual salary and the standard benefits package. After negotiating an additional $7,000 for annual salary and that professional development budget of $2,000 per year, a net gain of $9,000 per year. And so you could see you should always negotiate, because just by negotiating, you're going to get better than what you had before, and you're going to get valuable information about how this company solves problems together with you, and it'll really tell you whether or not it's a good fit for you moving forward. Okay, that's a lot of information, and I see that you're starting to put some questions in the Q&A. That's awesome. Please continue to put your questions in the Q&A. I would love to take them. Just want to take a brief moment to say, if you're interested in taking the next step in your career with Pathstream, our next set of digital marketing, data analytics, Salesforce administration, and project management programs starts soon. You can go to pathstream.com/programs to see what we offer. And if you want more negotiating resources, this is what I use to kind of put together this presentation today. You can go to blackswanltd.com. And a book that I would recommend to anybody who's interested in this whole process of negotiation is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. This is a great book. I've read it. I've definitely used these strategies in everything from negotiating my salary to working with customer service agents to getting refunds. It's a phenomenal book, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in the subject matter. But that all being said, it is time for the Q&A. And so let's see what people are talking about. Okay, Spencer, how do you get past the mental block of undervaluing yourself? Lauren, did you want to take this one?
No, I just wanted to make sure you saw these two questions at the top. I can contribute when you're done, but I feel like you've got it. I'm going to answer this third question offline though.
Got it. Okay, great. Yeah, Spencer, this is a good question. The mental block of undervaluing yourself, I think it's as a hard and fast rule, right? I think it's remembering. I think, let me put it this way. I think if you focus on the process of negotiating, right? Just focus on the tactics of what you do, right? So if we're telling ourselves, you know what, step one, we're going to gather more information. Step two, I'm going to gather some data around like what are the average salaries for this role. Step three, I'm going to use what I learned by gathering more information to ask for 20% more salary. Step four, I'm also going to explore the other things that I can negotiate, not just annual salary. I can look at things like PTO, and I can look at professional development opportunities. And if you focus just on that process, right? I think that's how you get past the mental block of undervaluing yourself, because it's no longer about, okay, well, what do you think about yourself and what are your anxieties? You're putting your focus on what you can control, which are the steps that you can take tactically and the moves that you can make. And if you can put your focus on that as much as possible, and then just have the discipline to click send on that email, right? And to not allow yourself to talk yourself out of not sending it, I think that's how you get past the mental block. But you really, it takes practice. It takes a certain amount of, the discipline of doing something that maybe feels, tough. Like you just kind of have to like force yourself over that hump. But I think the more you do that, and if you focus on, again, taking that positive us-centered approach so that you're not becoming combative or you're not making a conflict, I think you're going to have a lot of success there. And so I know this can be like a tough thing when we have these mental blocks, but I think, again, the more that you can focus on the actual small tactical steps, the better. So that's how I would say that. Tasha, how do you build a stance for requesting additional PTO? Yeah, Tasha, this is a great question. And this gets back to knowing your why, right? Like, so if you're just saying, for example, like, I want more PTO because I want more PTO, it's not the strongest argument in the world, right? Like it's an argument, but I don't think that one's probably going to land. Why do you want more PTO, right? Like if you are somebody who, maybe that you really value travel, and travel helps you clear your mind, and see problems in a new way, and then bring that new way of thinking back to your company where you are ultimately always more productive after that PTO. Well, that's a strong argument, because all of a sudden now you're framing it in a way where you're telling this company, look, yes, I'm asking you for this additional PTO, but it is going to benefit you and the things that you want out of this role. And so again, you're trying to come up with a solution where both sides are getting what they want. The company wants a productive employee who grows and it provides value to their mission. And you maybe want additional time to yourself so that you can recharge and you can be the best possible, clearest thinking employee that there is. And so if you can frame it in those terms and you can know why you're asking what you're asking for, I think the likelihood that you get it goes way up. So that's how I would do it. But again, there can be a lot of potential whys, right? If you're a parent, that's another why you might want additional PTO, right? Like there are many potential reasons. And so I would say that this is one of those things that's quite personal too. So hopefully that gave you at least one example of how to tackle that. Great, these are awesome questions. Please, by all means, we have a few more minutes, so feel free if anybody has additional questions to pop them in the Q&A. Well, I'm gonna stay on. In the meantime, like I said, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A still. This is the last Design Your Career workshop that we're gonna do for this calendar year for 2021, but we've done a ton of them, and we put all the recordings on our YouTube page. Again, we're going to email you the recording, but you can also view any of these on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/Pathstream. And if you subscribe, it's a really great way to stay up to date with all the resources that we put. They're totally free. You don't have to be a Pathstream student. You don't have to pay anything for them. We just put these things up here because we want to help people, get better jobs and to get paid what they deserve. And so that's there for you if you want to check out any of the other career workshops that we've done. And we will be coming back in 2022 with more. So that's just going to start after the first of the year. So just keep that in mind and keep that on your calendar. And yeah, thank you, Lauren, for that call for questions, guys. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
I have one thing to say, actually. One thing that I sometimes hear a lot from students is that they say, okay, this is, it's really great to know how to negotiate the offer once I get it. But sometimes I get asked in interviews for how much money I make or how much my offer should be for, right? Like, what is your salary expectations, right? Those are common questions that you might get in interviews. And I just want to share a couple of thoughts that I have about this. So when somebody asks you how much money you make, you do not have to answer that question. You are not legally obligated to answer that question. So what I want you to say instead is, if you get asked any questions in interviews about how much you want to make, how much you currently make, what you expect to make, you should say something like, I'd actually love to hear what the salary range for this role is first. So you put it back on them. The goal in your head is you want them to say the first number. Okay. So they might ask you the question, you say, great question. I'd love to first hear what the salary range is for this role. And they might say, well, the range is between $70,000 and $90,000, $70,000 and $90,000 a year. And you might say, great. Given my experience, I would expect to be on the higher end of that range. And then you leave it at that. If they keep asking you questions, just say, I don't really feel comfortable stating a specific number right now. So there are actually a lot of legal things around stating salary and how much you make. So remember that you do not have to say that, and you want them to name the first number.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Double underline. You don't have to commit to a number. Definitely don't do that. And I would follow Lauren's advice on that verbatim. So thank you for adding that, Lauren. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. So just thank you for everybody who came. Thank you for your participation. Hopefully this was valuable for you all. And Tasha, well, just to address this, because Tasha says they always come back that we have a large range. That's absolutely right. And that's okay Tasha, in the interview stage, you don't have to be landing on a number, right? You can always negotiate the offer after you get it, and you can always ask for the amount of money that's on the highest end of that range. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I think sometimes people, to Lauren's point, they feel pressure early on in the interview process to say how much they want to make or say how much they make currently. And you just don't have to do it, right? You could just ignore that and move past that question. It's not something that you have to commit to at all whatsoever. It's not going to make you look worse as a candidate. It's not something that you have to say at all. And Lauren just provided a great way to counter that, which I definitely would follow. So thank you for bringing that up, Tasha. Looks like, oh, good. Little last minute. Always, hey, I'm an old teacher, so every time people ask questions, I'm thrilled. So thank you, Alexis. What about when salary expectation asked about in the application? Lauren, what would you do there?
Yeah, so what I would suggest for this one is I would actually look up on a company that I'll put in the chat. It's called Glassdoor. But this is a website where you can look up the salary range for different roles. So for example, you can look up in San Francisco, what is an average data analyst make, right? And you can find that out. It's at glassdoor.com. And you can say something like, I can see that the average range of salary for the San Diego area for a digital marketer and entry-level position is between $70,000 and $80,000. So I'd expect to be at or above that average. You don't, if they say what your salary expectations are, you can always go back to the average for the region and for the role that you're in, and you can anchor on that.
Yeah, great point. And yes, who's asking, okay, do you think if an employer sees an applicant that's been in the data field for more than 10 years, the employer would still lowball you in terms of salary? It's definitely possible, right? Like it's hard to say anything definitive for every employer out there, but yeah, it's certainly possible that they would, start the job offer with an annual salary that's on the lower end of the spectrum, but that might be because they expect you to negotiate. And so, if you're somebody who has 10 years of experience, well, that's a really strong case to make to ask for whatever the highest end of that salary range is. And so, it's something where, of course, that might happen, but it doesn't mean that you have to be anchored by that initial low ball offer. You can always count, again, the standard operating procedure, if we want to talk in a general way, is ask for 20% more annual salary. But every individual is different with the experience that they're bringing and what they want, right? So this is by no means to say that you can only ask for 20% more annual salary. You can ask for anything that you want as long as you feel like you have a very strong argument for why you deserve that, and you're doing it in a professional and respectful way, right? So it's possible that you'll get lowballed with a lot of experience, but again, that doesn't matter at all, because you can counter with whatever you want as long as you know your why, right? But great question. Again, really great participation, everybody. And if you have any more questions about this, just come over to Pathstream. You can ask us, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. All right.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.